Alright, hey guys, what's up? You've probably seen the start of the breeding video, the quarantine, all that stuff, the stuff that you need to know before you start looking into anything. The next one we're going to do is a little bit about, I'll start you on the path of like researching on what you want to breed and different genetic and line bred things in leopard geckos that will cause animals to look a certain way. So let's start on that one. There are 5 things in leopard geckos that are easily manipulated as far as breeding and genetics go. So we're going to talk about those today. All right. The first, the 5 things are the sex, the size, the color, the pattern, and the eye pigmentation. These things are all easily manipulated depending on what animals you breed together. So I thought before we started into the genetics that we would go over these things first, because this is the first thing you should really learn is what you can manipulate before you start learning the genetics on how to manipulate it. This is basically breeding 001, let's put it that way. All right, the sex. If you guys don't know, leopard geckos are temperature sexable, which basically means, I'm going to move the camera here just a slight tad. Temperature sexing means that the sex of the animal is determined by the incubation temperature, which leopard geckos are one of those animals that you can definitely manipulate the sex of the animal due to the temperature at which the babies are incubated. The starting point that you really want to start the lowest that you can really go with incubation is the low 80s. You can do it at like the high 70s, but you're running the risk of losing the embryo just because they're too cold. So I would recommend 80 degrees as your starting point if you want to incubate for female. 80, 82, you're probably going to get all girls. It is possible that you'll get males out of that, but typically I would say 95 to 99% of your babies are going to be female. So it's one of those things that's pretty accurate, but there are, animals sometimes that will just kind of break the mold and they won't be what you want them to be. If you don't care about the sex and you just want to incubate them just to have, and have it be up to luck what they are, male or female, the mid-80s is what you want to go with. The mid-80s, you'll get a mixture of males and females, and it should be about a 50-50 mix depending on like what the temperature is, stuff like that. So I'm talking like you're at around 85, 86, you're going to get a mix. 87, you're probably going to get a little bit more males. 84, you're probably going to get a little bit more females, if not a lot more females. 90 degrees is the key for males. I hear a lot of people that are like, oh, I temperature sexed my babies for males at like 88, blah, blah, blah. It's still more of a possibility that it's going to be a girl at that point. So you definitely want to go around 90 degrees. Maybe a degree or 2 higher or lower, but I like it 90, maybe 91. I've seen a lot of people that'll incubate at 89 and they still get females out of that. So I like to do it right at 90, 90.5, something like that. That's where I like to keep mine. Once you start getting hotter than like 91, 92, at 92 they start... It's really weird. They'll actually become, you'll start incubating more for girls again, which that is pretty crazy, and it's just one of those things that happens. There's that small window where you'll get the males, and then then higher is girls. Once you start getting above like 93, 94, 95, you're running the risk of killing the embryo as well just because they're way too hot. Whenever the females are incubated at a high temperature like that, that they hatch out female at that high incubation temperature, they're usually called hot females, which hot females typically are more aggressive, less likely to breed, and they could be little terrors, if you will. So you kind of want to stay away from those as well. Just because I think that the high temperature will actually cause them to produce more testosterone, so in turn they act kind of like males, but they are a female. So you want to stay away from those. So I would go 91 and below, you're good to go. The other thing that you can do with temperature sexing is you can play with the coloration a little bit as well. The key with temperature sexing, it's usually within the first 14 days the sex will already be determined. To be on the safe side, go to 21 days, but usually within the first 2 weeks the sex is already determined in your baby that's in the egg. So after that, you can kind of start to manipulate the coloration, especially in albinos, like the Tremper albino. Sometimes you can do it in the bells and the rainwaters as well. But it's usually you can manipulate it more in albinos. What I say by manipulating the color and stuff like that is you can actually put them in the 80-degree incubator for like 2-3 weeks, and then steadily move them into a higher temperature until they hatch out, and that'll actually produce better colored females. Which some people do it, some people don't. Some people consider it cheating to make better color, but it's one of those things that it's one of the things you can do with breeding to manipulate how the animal looks. But I mean, you don't want to go from like 80 to 90 degrees in one shot, like real quick, because that could kill your embryo as well. So you want to do it slowly if you do it. What I usually do is I have incubators set up at every 2 degrees higher than the next one, and I'll actually snake them through whenever I do this method. The past couple years have been kind of lazy and haven't done the method. I just have left them in the incubators that they were set at, and they've just hatched out in whatever incubation that they've been set at. But it's just one of those things that you can help, or you can also determine a little bit of the color by the temperature incubation as well. All right, hopefully this doesn't fall. It's kind of my low budget production here. The next thing we're going to talk about is size. You guys have probably all heard of giants, supergiants. They are the larger animals. It is said to be codominant. There are different opinions on that, whether it's genetic, whether it's just breeding big animals to big animals gives you big animals. Not all supergiants are created equal, though, either, as well. Not all supergiants are going to be, 180, 200 gram monsters. It's definitely, there's a lot more to do with it as far as like raising them go, and not all of them are genetically predisposed to get super, super huge. There's definitely a range of how big a supergiant or a giant will get. But at the same time, it can be genetic as well. There is the one camp that thinks that you breed a large animal to another large animal, you're going to get large babies, just like in humans. I mean, you breed, if Shaq has kids, I mean, he's probably going to have large children as well. If he, has kids to his wife is a little bit larger than normal as well. But that's just... That's a theory. Then there's also the genetic camp, which believes wholeheartedly that it's genetic. I've talked to some people that breed giants, and not all supergiants get super, super large. I mean, you'll get 1 or 2 of them a year that are, monsters, but then there's also ones that aren't quite as big. So it's definitely one of those things that's... you could take it either way. Big animal to big animal, you're going to get more big animals, whether it be genetic or just like a line bred thing as well. The other thing is Afghanicus blood. Afghanicus blood, which is basically using the pure subspecies of Macularis afghanicus. It can actually cause the animals to stay a little bit smaller as well. That's why I have it under size. It's not really a genetic thing, it's more of how much Afghanicus blood you have in the animal. Macularis afghanicus is actually a smaller form, wild occurring form of a leopard gecko that they get about, females they might max out at like 45 to 50 grams, and they'll breed at 40 grams, which sounds small, but even the eggs are a little bit smaller, so it's okay. That is something that can cause the animal to stay a little bit smaller. If it has Afghanicus blood in it, it's going to stay a little bit smaller. The other thing about supergiants and giants, a lot of the females of supergiants and giants, they don't get super large as well. You could have a giant female that actually will be about the same size as a regular animal. It's definitely more predominant in males that they get the super large look to them. The other thing with giants and supergiants is like their length as well. It's not just their weight; it's their length. Usually, babies of like supergiants, you can tell right off the bat because they're really lean, long, lanky animals. Until they start really fattening up, they're just long animals. It would be just like a tall human, if you will. But that's something you can manipulate is the size of the animal. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the color. The color of the animal can be determined by line-bred things or genetic things. It's one of those things that can, it can be determined by different aspects of what is breeding to what. Some of the line-bred characteristics of color are the pigmentation that you can see in the animal itself, such as tangerines. Like we said before, like a lot of people have their own tangerine lines, and it's because they are line breeding for tangerine. The tangerine color actually started as like a little small speck on one animal that it was more like that speck was oranger than normal. So what they did was they just basically bred that animal to other animals to make that orange coloration come out more. Same thing with the lavender coloration. They made the lavender come out a little bit more. Sometimes you'll see lavender colorations in subspecies, like the fasciolatus and stuff like that. They have more of that pastel look to them. So to put more lavender into the animal, you could use fasciolatus blood to do that as well. But lavender is also a line-bred trait. Whenever you get the tangerine and the lavender together in the same animal in the same spot, they'll kind of overlap each other, and that's what creates the greenish look to them. The greenish look to them, it's not green like this shirt or grass or anything like that. It's not that bright of green. It's basically the lavender and the tangerine coming together, overlapping, and causing a greenish tint to it. That's basically what causes the green coloration. You'll see it in different lines of tangerine. You'll see it in the emerines. My G project has it. Different projects will have it in there, and it's basically just the lavender over the tangerine that causes the green. The other thing that you'll see color coming in that's part of the tangerine influence is the carrot tail and carrot head. Carrot tail is of course on the tail, carrot head is on the head. It's basically just the tangerine coloration that is in those two specific body parts. Carrot tail is definitely something that can be line bred, and you can make them almost 100% carrot tail at this point. Whenever it first started with Ray Hine, carrot tail was maybe 20%, and then he basically line bred it to make it more of the tail was orange. And it's just one of those things that's been line bred for years. The yellow pigmentation. Like I said, any color that naturally occurs on a leopard gecko is something that can be line bred. High yellows, one of the first line bred morphs, if you will, was basically that. They saw more yellow pigmentation on an animal, and they tried to breed for more of that yellow pigmentation. Same thing with black/brown. That is also something that can be line bred as well. As the filming of this, you guys have probably heard of the black pearl and stuff like that. I didn't put the black pearl as genetic yet. I'm still thinking that it's line bred to a point. But if breeders out there that are working on it, please contact me. Let me know if I messed that one up. Because I would think if it was genetic, you would see more of them already and stuff like that. But anyway, the things that are genetic that affect the color. Blizzards affect the color because, I mean, it just makes the animal solid white. You can have darker blizzards, you can have yellowish looking blizzards, or the whitish blizzards. The patternless, Murphy patternless trait. That can cause the animal to have, that patternless look to it, that it's more yellow in coloration. You can have Marshall McGuinness's line that has some carrot tail on it as well. So those are genetic recessive things that will change the coloration of the animal itself. The ghost and pastel, those are both things that kind of wash the color out a little bit, so it does have an effect on the color. White and yellows, it kind of pastels everything out. It's a dominant trait that it definitely changes the coloration of the animal itself. Snows, they definitely change the color of the animals, whether it be line bred or co-dom or dominant, depending on which line of snow you're talking about. The snow will change the coloration of the animal. It takes away these tangerine colors and stuff like that. Sometimes you can line breed snow and tangerine together. You'll get more of the creamsicle line, if you will, by JMG, where they basically have line bred snows to make them have kind of like a pastelish look to them. Enigmas. Enigmas will drastically change the color of an animal. Sometimes they change it for the good, sometimes they change it for the bad. The bad thing about enigmas in coloration is that you can't really predict it or line breed for it. Sometimes you'll get tangerine enigmas that are awesome looking. Sometimes you'll get them that they're just like, really? Like, that's kind of ugly. So with the enigma, it's harder to line breed the color. With the white and yellow that's new, you can actually line breed for it more. It's a little bit more stable in what it produces year after year. The other things that affect color, albinos. Albinos definitely affect color because they don't have the black pigmentation in them. So that's another genetic thing that's recessive that will definitely determine what your animal looks like color-wise. Same thing with eclipse. Eclipses have a couple of different things that will cause coloration in different areas of the body to be different. White feet, white spots on the head, the white coming up the nose, white on the tail tip. And that will translate to all the albinos as well. The other thing with eclipses, once you get the eye pigmentation in, a lot of times it will wash out some of the color that if it didn't have the eye pigmentation. So the eclipse trait can definitely cause a difference in the coloration as well. These ones, the genetic stuff just changes it in weird ways. The line bred stuff, you can definitely line breed for it and make sure that the stuff looks better and stuff like that. The next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is pattern. Pattern is another thing that can be manipulated by breeding. And again, it can be line bred or genetic, depending on what type of pattern changing it is. The big one is the evolution of banding to aberrant to jungle to stripe to reverse stripe to patternless stripe. That is definitely something that has been proven that it happens. It doesn't mean that you breed a banded to a banded together that you're going to get aberrants. It's not that. You breed enough bandeds together, which banded is just your normal animal with the bands on it. You breed enough of those together, every once in a while you'll pop out an aberrant. Which aberrants just basically the bands are either broken or they just it doesn't look like a banded anymore. One of the bands is broken or there's a little bit of a jumbled mess in the back, and then you breed aberrants together. You'll get more aberrants or aberrants. You'll get more bandeds, but then every once in a while you'll get jungles, which jungles are basically there's no more banding on the back. There's just kind of almost like a swirled pattern. It's basically just a patterned trait that it's kind of just messes everything up on the back a little bit as far as the pattern goes. Then from jungles you'll get stripes, which the stripes are just the single stripe of color down the back. of like a tangerine color. I'll show you some different stripes whenever we start going through and actually looking at animals, stuff like that, so that you can get a better understanding of what stripe is. Maybe I'll post a link underneath this. Actually, I'll post a link on this one to go to a site that'll actually talk about all these things right here. The reverse stripe is just as it is. It's the opposite of a stripe. The patternless stripe. The patternless stripe is whenever you cross a stripe to a reverse stripe. Every once in a while you'll get animals where it'll be showing both and it'll actually look like there is no pattern to it at all. That's a patternless stripe. From the patternless stripe is where the eclipse trait and stuff like that it evolved from. So that's kind of like the progression of it, which the link that I'm going to show you, it'll actually talk about all that stuff in more detail. Other things that are pattern-based things that you need to know are baldy. Baldy is basically on usually a super hypo. It'll basically have no spotting on the head. It'll just be one solid color. Actually, if it's an albino, it's usually called a carrot head, just because there's no spotting on the head. Then, of course, blizzards are a huge thing that affects the pattern because there is no pattern anymore. The Murphy's patternless, that's another one. The four-eye trait. The four-eye trait is one of those things that most people don't talk about anymore, but it's actually a genetic thing where you'll have where the eyes are, there'll be two spots behind their head that look like eyes, and that's just what they coined a four-eyed trait. There's bandits, which basically have a little band across the nose. There are super hypos and hypos. Hypo is just basically the lack of, it's basically hypomelanistic, which is the lack of the black pigmentation. Super hypo is when there is no black pigmentation on the back of it at all. It's usually in the tangerine line. Once it's, yeah, pretty much all of them are in the tangerine line. You don't call it like a super hypo patternless stripe or something like that. They don't call it that. It's basically just in the tangerine line. The next one, the Halloween masks and the bolds. That is definitely something that affects the pattern. I actually believe that the Halloween mask actually evolved from like Afghanicus blood as well. Because if you look at an Afghanicus, Immacularis afghanicus, they actually have like more of a bolder pattern on their head, and I think it's just something that has kind of evolved out of that. The same thing with the bold stripe stuff. I think that kind of came out of more of an Afghanicus blood animal, but that's, you know, my opinions on things. Super snows. I'm not talking max snows here, because max snows, like, there's really no pattern thing to them. The super snows, they actually have that very, very distinct pattern to them. It's basically something that whenever it first happened, people were probably like, wow, how'd that happen? But it's basically, there's rows of black dots down the whole back of it. And of course, in like albinos, there are different colors and stuff like that. But in a normal super snow, it's just kind of black dots in kind of rows on their back the whole way down. The eclipse trait. That can mess with the pattern a little bit as well, but they're kind of two different things. But it's one of those things that you can get like the white spots on the head and like different. I've seen almost like pied looking animals. That all comes because of the eclipse trait. White and yellows can definitely have an effect on the pattern. Because a lot of white and yellows, whenever they were first produced, there was super hypo thrown in there. So it kind of, in that aspect, will act polygenetic, even though white and yellow is a dominant trait. The super hypo being bred into the white and yellow, it'll actually mess with the pattern as well. So it's not really the white and yellow itself that does it, but a lot of white and yellows carry other traits in them, and that is what causes things to mess with the pattern a little bit as well. The other one, enigmas. They're the biggest one that messes with the pattern. I mean, whenever enigmas first came out, people were like, wow, what is that, and how do I buy one? And it's just one of those things that the enigma actually messes with the pattern quite a bit. but it also messes with it in a way that it's harder to reproduce it. Like that's why you don't see a lot of like bold stripe enigmas out there or striped enigmas, because like you can breed a bold stripe to an enigma and get some that look like it, but I mean other ones they'll just be totally it wipes it away. It's almost dominant over everything, so it doesn't let you manipulate as much stuff with that trait on a consistent basis. The next one, eye pigmentation. Eye pigmentation is something that's relatively new. Of course, you'll always have different eye pigmentations in albinos just because they're albino and they don't have the dark pigmentation in their eyes. The other one is enigmas. Enigmas will have typically like a reddish orange tint to their eyes as well. So those are two things that can cause the eyes to look a little bit different. The next one is eclipses. Whenever the eclipse first came out, it was kind of one of those wow animals as well, just because it messed with the eye pigmentation in the eye, which I just basically said that. The other things that can cause the eye pigmentation to look different is how they are into the eclipse trait is into different albino strains. The raptor, for instance, it has like that red-eyed look to it. The radar, it's almost like a brighter red. The raptor is more of a ruby red. The radar is a little bit more of a brighter red. Whenever it's into the rainwater, calling it a typhoon, then it's a very, very dark red, almost blackish looking eye to the animal, which makes it look totally unique over the other two. But they're all unique in their own way. It all can make the eye pigmentation look different. Eclipses, they can come in solid eye or snake eye, or variations of how much eye pigmentation is actually in it. If you have no eye pigmentation in it at all, a lot of people call them Abyssinian, which it's still part of that eclipse, and I've proved this out. It's still part of the eclipse eye pigmentation trait. It just has a different name because of it. You can't say, well, it's an eclipse because it doesn't have the eye pigmentation. People will get confused, stuff like that. It's a marketing thing to have basically a different way of calling an eclipse an eclipse. The other things that can change the eye pigmentation are the super snows. All super snows have solid eyes, whether it be the regular super snows that have the black, the Tremper super snows that have like that basically the same color as a raptor eye, the Bell ones that have that bright red eye, or the rainwater ones that have like the darker pigmentation in the eye. Super snows, they all have that pigmentation. That's why it's hard whenever you have super eclipses, super raptors, super radars, super typhoons, to know that which eye pigmentation is causing it. That's why you have to really know what animals you're putting together and what the chances are of them being what they are. The blizzards. Blizzards can have eye pigmentation in them as well, especially blazing blizzards for some reason. That does not mean that they have the same eye pigmentation as the raptor or the eclipse. You definitely have to know what line of blizzards you're buying. Diablo Blancos may look the same as a blazing blizzard, but they could be genetically two different things, so you just got to be very, very careful on which ones you're buying. That's actually why I don't breed for Diablo Blanco, is because I feel that it would be a disservice to anybody that I sold them to if it actually wasn't a raptor blizzard. My first one that I ever bought, actually, as a Diablo Blanco, it actually proved out not to be even het for raptor, let alone a raptor. So I wasn't, too happy with that, but, life goes on. The next trait, which all these, the eclipse, the blizzard, and the marble eye, they are recessive in how they act. The super snow, of course, is just the super form of the codominant max snow. Marble eyes. Marble eye is a recessive trait. I've actually proven it out. and I've proved it against eclipses to make sure that it's not the same eye pigmentation as well, and it doesn't come from a blizzard line or anything like that, so it's not that as well. And it has nothing to do with the super snow form of eye pigmentation either. So the marble eye is something of its own. If you want to take a look, I have pictures on my Facebook page, which if you just go right below here, it'll actually give you a link to my Facebook page, and you can actually see some of the marble eye stuff. The marble eye is definitely different in how it looks. Instead of having solid or snake-eyed or pieces of eye pigmentation, the marble eye actually looks like almost like you're looking through a kaleidoscope. The patterning is very broken up. Actually, on the banner over there, you can see how there's more black dots just like kind of scattered in there. That is one of the traits of having the marble eye pigmentation in an animal. But these are the 5 things that you definitely should know about whenever you're trying to manipulate any. These are the 5 things that you can manipulate in leopard geckos pretty easily. The next video we'll go through and start breaking down genetics, stuff like that. We'll go over dominant recessive, we'll go over codominant. I'll do a little putting squares and stuff like that. I'll probably actually use animals so you guys can get a visual of what it looks like since we're doing this all in video. And that should be about it. Hopefully I didn't take too long describing this. It looks like another half-an-hour video. I'm sorry it takes that long to actually go through all this stuff. But I try to do it as fast as possible and be more concise and stuff like that. But it's just very, very hard to go over all this in a 5-minute video. But anyway, have a good day, guys, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.